The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Alan Blumkin. I'm here with my good friend David Nemec to do another episode of David Nemec's Baseball History and Trivia, or Trivia and Statistics. We're celebrating today David's birthday. Happy birthday, David.
Thank you, Al.
Okay, today we're going to talk about the Hall of Fame elections, the upcoming writers' ballot, and maybe some players that are in the Hall of Fame that don't belong. Okay, David, you were saying earlier?
I thought they did a good job of selection this year. I have no quarrel with any of the six who were chosen. I do regret that Dick Allen once again missed out on being selected. I'm afraid he's never going to make it in any of our lifetimes, and that's a disappointment. But I do think that there are two living players who were selected, Oliva and Cott, both of them deserving. Cott had a really full career, full of a lot. Was a broadcaster for years. All around major addition to the game. And Oliva had a really fine career going until he got hurt. And his knee was never the same. And it curtailed him so that by the end of his career, he was really no more than a DH. He couldn't play the outfield anymore. But all in all, I thought the selections were excellent. Fowler and O'Neill, very deserving. Hodges, of course, very deserving. And Minnie had waited an awful long time to get in. He should have definitely been chosen during his lifetime.
Yeah, well, as far as Dick Allen is concerned, Gil Hodges took forever to get in.
Yeah.
It took him forever to get in, and so maybe Allen will get in the next time they have this committee meeting. As far as Oliva has, he hurt his knee in 1971 when he was winning his third batting title. And he also hit extremely well in the second dead ball era, which was from 1963 to 1968. I believe he was the first one ever to win the batting titles in his first two seasons. And in 72, he could hardly play because there's no DH. When they brought the DH in 73, he was able to play for a few years before, I think his last year was 1976. Minnie Minoso, as you and everybody else who knows me, I've been advocating for him for a very long time. And I was so glad when they announced that he finally made it in. Because with apologies to Roberto Clemente, I felt Minoso was the first Latin black superstar. And he went through an awful lot of problems, and he just took everything with a grain of salt. And then he was ambassador after his playing ended. He was an ambassador for the White Sox till practically before he passed away. And Buck O'Neill, I also was very happy that he made it in. And there are people on Facebook, I didn't get involved in any of these arguments because it's pointless, that were rapping Hodges that didn't belong, and Minoso didn't belong, and Buck O'Neill, so he hit 258 as a in the Negro Leagues. So I said, he's not in there because of his playing career. He became the biggest ambassador of the Negro Leagues. And frankly, when I watched the Ken Burns series years ago, he was the only talking head I could tolerate.
Yeah, you're right. He was a huge addition to that show. You're right. You use exactly the right word too to describe not only O'Neill but Fowler. Fowler was a better player than O'Neill, I think, all in all. Very good player, but he was also, a really prime mover for the entire black population who were interested in baseball in the latter part of the 19th century. And he moved from team to team, from town to town. He was really nomadic, and never stayed in any one place very long. And we know that he married a woman from St. Louis at some point in the early 1880s, and we can assume he probably had a family, but we can't imagine how he could have had an intact family because he was traveling so much. He moved to so many different places. Any kids he had, I don't know how they could possibly have ever enrolled in a school and stayed there for more than a month or two. So we don't know. We really don't know anything about his personal life when you come right down to it, except that Bud Fowler was not his real name. His real name was John Jackson Jr., and he followed in his father's footsteps as not only in being named after him, but also in his profession. His father was a barber, and Bud made his living during the off season, opening barbershops wherever he happened to be at the time. And from all appearances, was very good at it and was able to support a family, assuming he had one. And all in all, richly deserved. Glad to see him finally in it, and I think Negro League aficionados, and there are many of them, are all very pleased too. And the same with O'Neill's choice.
Yeah, but the Negro League aficionados are very upset about the John Donaldson and Cannonball Redding not getting in.
Yeah. They deserve it too. There are a lot of players in that. I'm not even sure who's in and who's out at this point because the Hall of Fame has grown so huge that it's very hard to keep track. And there are so many names in there, as you more or less hinted at the beginning, who don't belong. That it's tough now to actually say, for me anyway. To say with absolute certainty who's in and who's not.
We have the writers are announcing their selections next month, and the 5 top are David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez, who was suspended for a season. The politically incorrect Kurt Schilling, and the usual suspects, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens.
Yeah, and I'm afraid that Ortiz will get in, and I don't like to see it. He wasn't really a complete ball player, and regardless of what others think, I do think that Peds was influential in his career. Hate to say it. I think was influential in the careers of several people who are already in the Hall of Fame, and not much can be done about that. So Bonds and Clemens may never make it for that reason, but there are some who will have made it over the course of history, and that I think is very unfortunate.
Yeah, one of the things they opened up was the DH when they elected Edgar Martinez.
Yeah, they did.
Who played almost all his games as a DH, and so they opened that up, and that's why Ortiz is, favored. The other couple of other names were mentioned. Todd Helton, who the biggest block against him is he played his whole career in Coors Stadium.
Exactly.
And the other one is Scott Rowland.
Yeah, he's kind of a shadowy figure, even though he really played not that all that long ago, and he had a good solid career. And given the fact that he played the field and played it well, throughout his career, I would put him in ahead of Edgar Martinez.
Edgar Martinez is it. Edgar Martinez isn't. Yeah.
I know he is. I know he's in.
Yeah.
But I would have chosen Roland over Martinez.
And so that's supposed to come out the next week. But I saw a picture when Oliva got the call that he was in. He started crying.
Yeah.
I also said that Minnie Minoso was the, like Clemente was the giant of the Puerto Rican players. Minoso was the giant of the Cuban players.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet him when I played senior league ball.
Yeah.
He came one year in there to Arizona. He played too. He was studied then, and probably close to in his 70s or close to it. I don't know how much he actually played, but he was selling copies of his books, and I got a chance to spend a few minutes with him and talk to him and say how much I admired him, and enjoyed the fact that he came up with Cleveland and that he did have a couple great seasons toward the end of his career with the Indians. Unfortunately, 1959 being one of them, depriving him of a chance to play in the White Sox pennant winner because he went back to the Sox later, and he really is associated more with the White Sox, of course, than with the Indians.
Yeah, he came up with the Indians, and then right. I think it was a week or two into the 1951 season, there was a 3-team trade. The White Sox sent Cossario and Dave Philly to the A's. The A's sent
Lou Brissy
and the catcher Ray Murray, I think, was the other.
Murray started out as an Indian.
Okay, they sent Lou Brissy, and the Indians sent Minoso to the White Sox. I don't know whether it was a question of having a black quota at that point with the Indians.
Well, it was no, there really wasn't. Bill Beck would have had an all-black team if he'd had, if he'd had Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and guys like that hanging around.
He was gone by then. He was gone after 1949.
I know he was gone by then.
Yeah.
But the aura of that it was a team that really fancied a ball player regardless of his color remained as long as Lopez was manager anyway, and they did have a lot of marginal black players throughout the 50s, and Minoso really was an older guy by the time he got to the Indians. He shaved a couple of years off his true age, but even then at that he was older, and they had a choice between keeping him and keeping Harry Suitcase Simpson, who looked more promising. He was younger and did have a good career eventually, but never with Cleveland. He was a real disappointment with Cleveland, and there were regrets even during very early on that when we let Minoso go, we really let probably a pennant or two go with him, because with him we could have really done the job. He would have taken over in left field. And probably bumped out Dale Mitchell a couple of years earlier, and probably may have moved to right. He wouldn't have moved to right because Colavito was there, but Minoso was a good all-around player, great base runner, and really had the full pack.
Yeah, he was. I looked at his page in Baseball Reference. He had 11 times he led the league in hit by pitches. Which is incredible, yeah. And he should have been Rookie of the Year in 1951, even though I love Gil McDougall. Gil McDougall was a Yankee, but Minoso deserved that over him.
No, he did. Yeah, his stats were much better. Yeah, and it was clear that who was going to be the better ball player in the long run. McDougall was a good player throughout the 50s, no question. And he could play all three infield positions almost equally well, second, short, and third. And I think he was a regular at all three with the Yankees.
Yeah. Except that he always said after he hit the line drive that hit Herb Score that his enthusiasm went down the tubes.
Yeah. And
they were by 1960. He was a backup, and they were going to put him on the expansion list. And he retired. He had the business in New York. He had a family here, and he didn't want to go to Washington or L.A. To play any longer. So he retired. But he really said that his enthusiasm went almost out after the hitting Score in the eye with that line drive.
Yeah, no, it was. I know. I never have been on the field where that kind of casualty occurred. Nothing that serious ever occurred. But I was on the field to see teammates and break legs and tear their rotator cuffs sliding into second base and stuff like that. And that in itself took the heart out of the game for me to see a teammate get injured or an opposing player for that matter, because baseball is not by any means. It's a contact sport, and even though it's not seen as that, in that you can get seriously hurt very quickly.
Well, now players get a hangnail and they're out for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, there were only 16 teams in the 50s, and
I know that. Yeah.
If you had a hangnail for more than 5 minutes, they had 3 guys waiting to take your spot.
Yeah, I remember what I read that Stan Musial played most of 1947 with a ruptured appendix.
Right.
But they froze.
Yeah.
And Bob Serve, when he had that big year with the A's in 1958, played half the season. He had his jaw broken by a pitch. And he had it wired, and he was playing.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're throughout history. Chuck Klein pulled a hamstring in 1934, and never was the same player again. And there are a lot of players whose careers were derailed by serious injuries, and of course, Herb Score is probably among the foremost.
Oh yeah,
and I think he would have probably been a Hall of Fame pitcher if he had been allowed to,
Yeah, another one that destroyed his career by running into walls all the time was Pete Reza.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about these guys in the Hall of Fame, and these are guys who, at the beginning of their career, and their career didn't last much more than a couple of years because of injuries, were likely Hall of Fame candidates. And a guy like Cott played for 25 seasons and pitched for pitched with good teams, pitched with bad teams, pitched with injuries. He really had a long and full career. But his career in comparison, there's a guy just like him who had things that Cott didn't have, and that's Tommy John.
Yeah, I was going to bring him up. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because John pitched for a good team with the Yankees. He has a major surgery that prolongs pitchers' careers named after him. He seemingly has everything going for him, yet he's never really mentioned in the same breath with all these other guys we've been talking about as potential Hall of Famers or guys who probably should be in.
Wow.
And
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And the one thing about Cott, and I think I'm pretty sure I'm up with this, that Cott played in the 1965 in that World Series with the Twins and the 1982 World Series with the Cardinals. I think that might be the longest gap between the first and second World Series appearance.
Wow, I didn't know that. That is a feat. 17 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. No, I can't imagine who any other player would be able to claim that.
I think Cut would have won the American League Cy Young Award when he had that 25-game season, but that was still in the time that they were giving out one.
Well, let's see. Ruth. Well, wait a minute. Ruth was in the 15 series with the Red Sox, and
I'm talking about the difference between first and second, not
first
the
and
difference
second.
between first and last. Yeah, because I learned from you when I'm asking myself stuff like this to clarify it.
Yeah, you did clarify it, and I missed that. You're right.
That's all right.
No.
Okay, now do you want to discuss players that are in there, maybe even also managers and executives that are in there that have no business being in there?
Yeah, I think the executive branch, there are a lot of guys who should be in there who aren't. I starting with Chris Van der Aa, who really was a real showman and put together a good team, chose the right guy to put it together. Charlie Comiskey and the St. Louis Browns in the 80s were colorful, interesting, loaded with interesting players. And while Van der Aa himself was not much of a baseball man, he was a real showman and knew how to pack people into his ballpark, what would bring them out, and he managed to put a good team out there along with it. And it paled. I mean, his later teams paled in comparison. They were abysmal teams in the late 1890s, and eventually he was forced out. But there's a guy who really belongs in the Hall of Fame, and head of guys like Tom Yawkey and even Jake Rupert, and
Jake Rupert, it took them forever to put him in, but Yawkey bought his way in.
Yeah.
Yawkey owned that team for 60 years, and they never won a World Series.
Yeah.
And he was a drunk and a racist also.
Yeah. There really wasn't anything good that he brought to the Red Sox. I don't accept that he brought money, and he
did get them out of the horror show that they were in the 20s and early 30s.
Yeah. They were bad. They were among the worst teams in baseball.
Yeah, I remember being at the convention in Boston in 2002, and somebody the conversation turned around to Harry Frazee. I said they're defending him, blah blah blah. I said all I know. The football coach Bill Parcells said, "You are what your record says you are." All I know, with Frazee bought into the team, they were world champion, and by the time he left, they were laughing stock.
Yeah, they were. He either sold or traded on the cheap for almost all his good players. And
yeah, most of them wound up on the Yankees.
Yeah, strangely, very strangely. Yeah, but it's hard to say among executives today, and really you're looking at you're thinking about Moneyball and Billy Bean, and is he going to be in the Hall of Fame? It's one day, or there are a lot of names like that we can throw around, but
what about the immortal Morgan Bulkley?
Yeah, the first president of the National League, only because they had to have a titular head.
Yeah, because Holbert took them forever to put Holbert in.
Yeah, I know, because it's shameful if you look at some of the selections, but once they're there for life.
I know that, yeah.
It's like a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, I've done.
You're there, and you're not going to get them out. So that's
okay. I've done discussions on a lot of the players that Frankie Frisch, and Charlie Gehringer put in. Frisch especially, yeah. Yeah,
the 30s were, Travis Jackson, Freddie Lindstrom were very, very marginal. They weren't even top the top figures in their time. And then,
what about George Kelly?
Season. George Kelly was absolute travesty. But,
the Rube Marquardt?
Rube Marquardt, marginal, very marginal.
Okay, well, he got to St. Louis. He got Bottomley in.
Yeah.
He got Chick Hafey in. And he got in my all-time favorite of his, Jesse Haynes.
Yeah,
and there used to be
Haynes
a guy years ago on Facebook would pull up pictures of every Hall of Famer on their birthdays. So they put up one of Jesse Haynes, and I commented that the only way this guy should get in is by buying a ticket.
Yeah.
And he removed it because it wasn't positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
but
what's done is done. Unfortunately, there are no do-overs in the Hall of Fame.
Why is Tommy McCarthy in?
He was part of the Heavenly Twins.
I know,
Duffy, and he had people back at that time in '46. Some of whom had actually still seen him play. He did originate some things. You know, he used to juggle fly balls, and then the rule was you could not tag up on a fly ball to the outfield and advance a base until the ball was in the firm grasp of the outfield.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh yeah. So McCarthy would camp under a routine fly ball and then juggle it and run toward the infield as he was juggling it. And finally he would have it firmly in his grasp, but he'd be about only 20 feet behind between second and first base if he was playing right field. I think that was his normal spot. And Duffy
when was that
center,
output?
if I'm not mistaken.
When was that output?
It changed. The rule was changed in the early. That's an interesting question because a batting title was decided exactly by this rule. The rule was changed sometime in the early 1900s. Once an outfielder made contact with the ball, a runner was free to tag up and advance a base. And I believe it was what year did Zach Wheat win the batting title? Was it 17 or 18? I can't remember which it was offhand. But Wheat won the batting title one year because Ed Roush juggled the fly ball before he caught it, finally. And an appeal was made when a runner scored a win. I believe it was Heine Grove. Scored from third base. I might be wrong about the players, but
Hagler was on the Reds.
He was on the Reds. Somebody scored a run, and the appeal was made to Hall of Fame umpire Hank O'Day. Well, by the time Ed had the ball, Grove or whoever scored the run took off before Ed had the ball firmly in his grasp. And O'Day ruled the runner out. The game was protested and had to be played over. And Roush had gotten a couple or three hits in that game. And the rule then was tie games or protested games that had to be played over. All the stats were erased. So those three hits were erased. And Wheat, who had also played in a couple of protested games, had stats erased in which he'd gone overs. And Wheat, as a result, won the batting title because of that one game where Roush juggled the fly ball. He cost himself the batting title that year.
Oh, wow.
And O'Day made the Hall of Fame despite making rulings like this all throughout his career that resulted in protested games because he himself didn't really know the rules that well.
Yeah, because one year at our local SABR meeting, I did a presentation which I called the Crucifixion of Fred Merkle. And O'Day O'Day allowed that. In a game with the Pirates, he allowed that. The guy left. Didn't touch second, and he allowed it.
Yeah.
And he just went crazy. And then what happened? Merkle was the only game he started all year.
Yeah.
He was a 20-year-old rookie. and he took all the heat. And McGraw, who was the manager at the time, took no heat because McGraw had all the newspaper men in his pocket back then.
Well, yeah, McGraw. I certainly read about the game. Warren Gill was the Pirates player.
Yeah.
Who had not touched second base, and Evers clamored for him to be called out on a game-winning hit because he hadn't advanced to the next base as the rule called for him to do. And O'Day didn't listen to Evers until Evers got him that night in the hotel lobby where the players were staying and the umpires were staying too, and talked to him about it and said, "This keeps going on year after year after year, and it's not, it's in the rules. If you don't advance to the next base safely, you're forced out." So, and Gill didn't do it, and then certainly this was common knowledge that it had happened. I mean, unless McGraw didn't read the sporting news or didn't even pay any attention to what other teams
he
were
should
doing.
have known.
He must have known, and he should have told his players, "Look, we're playing the Cubs. It could be they're contenders, we're contenders. You've got to pay attention to Johnny Evers because he almost had a player called out at second base who didn't advance on a base hit, a game-winning hit, then touch second base." And he never. I certainly don't think he ever talked to Merkel about it, and he probably never talked to anybody in his team about it. That's so. Right. It's very careless managing, if nothing else, on McGraw's part.
And they're saying the standard version was that cost the Giants the pennant. Well, the Giants 2 days later played a doubleheader with the Reds, and at the Polo Grounds they lost both games. In fact, the losing pitchers were Marquardt, who was in his first year, and McGinnity, who was his last year. And the whole thing with that was just, and then Harry Kovaleski beat them 3 times over the weekend to force that playoff game. Yeah,
and if the Pirates, we talked about this, I think, in other meetings, but if the Pirates had simply won the last game they played that season with the Cubs, they would have won the pennant. It wouldn't have had to be a playoff game, but they didn't. They lost. And it's so. But getting back to the Hall of Fame, most of these, Wheat's in the Hall of Fame. I always regard him as a marginal figure. Without that batting title, I don't know that he ever would have made the Hall of Fame. I think Sherry McGee was a better ball player. Wheat did play for a couple Dodgers pennant winners. McGee never really played on a pennant winner, even though he's with the 1919 Reds.
Yeah, my phone is dying.
He didn't get, is it? Okay. So we can
resume this the next time.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your patience, and again, I apologize for my my error before, and again, happy birthday, and give my best to Marilyn.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be with you again.
Pleasure. Take care.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.